In the shadow of Germany's interwar turmoil, a figure emerged whose name would become synonymous with cruelty and terror: Klaus Barbie. Born on October 25, 1913 in Bad Godesberg, a small town near Bonn, Barbie's early years were shaped by the aftermath of World War I and the economic struggles that plagued the Weimar Republic. The town of Bad Godesberg, now a part of Bonn, would later gain notoriety as the site of the 1938 Munich Agreement negotiations between Hitler and Chamberlain, a cruel irony given the role one of its sons would play in the coming years. Young Klaus grew up in a middle-class family, his father Nicholas serving as a schoolteacher and later as a civil servant. The Barbie household, like many others in Germany at the time, felt the sting of national humiliation following the Treaty of Versailles. This atmosphere of resentment and economic hardship would prove fertile ground for the seeds of extremism that would later define Klaus Barbie's life. The hyperinflation of 1923, which saw the value of the German mark plummet to the point where children played with stacks of worthless banknotes, left an indelible mark on the young Barbie's psyche. As a child, Klaus was described as intelligent but withdrawn. His father's strict discipline and the loss of his brother to illness in 1923 further shaped his formative years. Tragedy struck again when Nicholas Barbie, who had fought in World War I, died in 1933 from wounds sustained during his military service. This loss, occurring in the same year that Adolf Hitler rose to power, marked a turning point in Klaus Barbie's life. It was said that Barbie kept a photograph of his father in uniform throughout his life, a reminder of the military legacy he sought to uphold and surpass. At the age of 20, swept up in the fervor of National Socialism, Barbie joined the Hitler Youth. His involvement with the Nazi Party deepened rapidly, and by 1935 he had become a member of the Sicherheitsdienst (SD), the intelligence agency of the SS. This marked the beginning of Barbie's descent into the darkest corners of the Third Reich's machinery of oppression. It was during this time that Barbie first encountered Reinhard Heydrich, the architect of the Holocaust, who would become a significant influence on his career. Barbie's rise through the ranks was swift and ruthless. He quickly gained a reputation for his efficiency and unwavering dedication to Nazi ideology. In 1937, at the age of 24, he joined the Nazi Party officially, receiving membership number 4,583,085. His commitment to the cause was total, and his superiors took notice. One of his early mentors, SS Sturmbannführer Franz Six, later remarked, "Barbie had a keen mind for intelligence work and an uncompromising dedication to our cause. He was destined for great things in the service of the Reich." As war loomed on the horizon, Barbie's role in the SS expanded. In 1940, he was assigned to the Netherlands, where he honed his skills in counterintelligence and the brutal suppression of resistance movements. In Amsterdam, Barbie was involved in the roundup of Dutch Jews, including the raid that nearly captured Anne Frank and her family in 1942. In November 1942, Barbie's trajectory took a sinister turn when he was posted to Lyon, France. At just 29 years old, he was appointed head of the local Gestapo, officially known as Section 4 of the Sicherheitspolizei und SD. Lyon, a hotbed of French resistance activity, became the stage for Barbie's most notorious atrocities. The city, known as the capital of the resistance, would become a crucible of suffering under Barbie's reign. Under Barbie's command, the Gestapo in Lyon embarked on a reign of terror. Torture became a routine practice, with Barbie personally overseeing and often participating in the brutal interrogations. His methods were so savage that even some of his Nazi colleagues were disturbed. One SS officer, Harold Haynes, later testified, "Barbie's reputation for cruelty was known even among the SS. His name alone was enough to make prisoners tremble. His methods were so extreme that they even caught the attention of Klaus Knochen, the senior SS and police leader in France, who in 1944 noted, 'Barbie was absolutely ruthless, a true friend, a true enemy.' Barbie's brutality extended to his own men. He once reportedly executed a subordinate for showing leniency to a prisoner. As the war drew to a close, Barbie fled Lyon on August 19, 1944, narrowly escaping capture by the advancing Allied forces. He retreated to Germany, where he continued to work for the crumbling Nazi intelligence apparatus until the final days of the Third Reich. In the chaos of defeat, Barbie managed to evade justice, unlike many of his colleagues who faced trial at Nuremberg. The Reign of Terror, Klaus Barbie's bloody legacy in Lyon. The cobblestone streets of Lyon, once alive with the bustle of everyday life, fell silent under the shadow of Nazi occupation. In November 1942, a dark figure arrived to take command of the city's Gestapo headquarters at the Hotel Terminus. Klaus Barbie, at just 29 years old, would soon earn the chilling moniker the Butcher of Lyon, a title that would haunt the city for generations to come. The Hotel Terminus, located at 182 Avenue Berthelot, became the epicenter of terror, its elegant facade masking the horrors within. Lyon, known as the capital of the French resistance, became the stage for Barbie's most heinous acts. The city, with its strategic location at the confluence of the Rhône and Saône rivers, had long been a center of commerce and culture. Now, under Barbie's reign, it would become a crucible of suffering. Jean Moulin, the resistance leader, once said of Lyon, "Here beats the heart of the resistance." Little did he know how prophetic those words would become, as the city's heart would soon be tested by unimaginable cruelty. The Hotel Terminus, a once elegant establishment on Cours de Verdun, was transformed into a house of horrors. Within its walls, Barbie orchestrated a campaign of terror that would claim the lives of an estimated 14,000 people during his 2-year reign. The hotel's basement, with its maze of corridors and soundproof rooms, became Barbie's personal torture chamber. Survivors spoke of the constant screams that echoed through the building, a symphony of agony that never ceased. Barbie's methods were as cruel as they were effective. His preferred torture technique, known as the baignoire, or bathtub, involved submerging victims in ice-cold water until they nearly drowned, only to revive them and begin the process anew. Survivors spoke of electric shocks, beatings, and psychological torments that pushed the boundaries of human endurance. One resistance fighter, Henry Borland, later recalled, "Barbie didn't just want information, he enjoyed the suffering he inflicted." Another survivor, Lisa Lesèvre, described how Barbie personally broke one of her vertebrae with a spiked ball attached to a chain, an injury that plagued her for the rest of her life. The butcher's reputation spread quickly through the underground networks of the resistance. His name became synonymous with brutality, striking fear into the hearts of those who dared to oppose the Nazi regime. Barbie took a personal interest in hunting down members of the resistance, seeing it not just as a duty, but as a sadistic game. He was known to disguise himself and frequent local cafes, listening for any whisper of resistance activity. This led to the capture of numerous operatives, including the renowned Raymond Aubrac and his wife Lucy, in June 1943. One of the most infamous episodes of Barbie's tenure in Lyon occurred on June 21, 1943. On that fateful day, he captured Jean Moulin, the high-ranking leader of the French resistance, in the suburb of Caluire-et-Cuire. Moulin, a symbol of French defiance, was subjected to unimaginable tortures under Barbie's direct supervision. For days, Moulin endured beatings, water torture, and having his fingernails torn out. Despite the agony, Moulin never broke, never revealed the names of his compatriots. He died on July 8, 1943, his silence a final act of resistance against the Nazi terror. Years later, André Malraux would say of Moulin, "Today, Jean, we come to escort you into the French Pantheon, you who perfectly knew what it meant to be French, you who perfectly knew what it meant to be human." The capture and torture of Moulin was a devastating blow to the resistance, but it only fueled Barbie's appetite for cruelty. He intensified his efforts, launching raids across Lyon and the surrounding countryside. No one was safe from his reach, not even children. Barbie's network of informants grew, and he employed French collaborators, known as the Milice, to aid in his reign of terror. One such collaborator, Paul Touvier, would later become the first Frenchman convicted of crimes against humanity for his role in Barbie's operations. On April 6, 1944, Barbie ordered one of his most notorious operations, the raid on a children's home in Isieux, a small village about 60 miles east of Lyon. The home had been a safe haven for Jewish children, many of whom had been smuggled out of Germany and occupied territories. In a single sweeping action, Barbie's men arrested 44 children and 7 adults. The youngest child was just 4 years old. They were all sent to Auschwitz, where most were gassed upon arrival. Only one adult, Leah Feldblum, survived to testify decades later. She remembered Barbie's cold smile as the children were loaded onto trucks, saying, "It was as if he was watching a school outing, not sending innocents to their deaths." Among the children was 11-year-old Liliane Gerenstein, who had written a letter to God just days before the raid, pleading, "God, how good you are, how kind, and if one had to count the number of goodnesses and kindnesses you have done, one would never finish." The Isieux raid was just one of many operations targeting Jews in the region. Under Barbie's command, thousands of Jews were rounded up and deported to death camps. He personally oversaw many of these deportations, meticulously documenting the process with the same efficiency he applied to torture sessions. One of his most meticulous records was of the deportation of 86 Jews from Lyon on August 11, 1944, just days before the city's liberation. This document would later serve as crucial evidence in his trial. As the Allied forces advanced and the liberation of France drew near, Barbie's actions became even more frenzied. In a final act of cruelty, he organized the last transport from Lyon, known as the Last Train. On August 11, 1944, just days before the city's liberation, over 600 prisoners were crammed into cattle cars bound for Nazi camps. Among them was Simone Lagrange, then a teenage girl, who later testified, "Barbie was there on the platform, watching us with those cold eyes. I'll never forget that gaze." The train's journey was halted by Allied bombings, and some prisoners managed to escape. Those who couldn't were sent to Ravensbrück and Auschwitz. Barbie's reign of terror extended beyond the walls of the Hotel Terminus and into every corner of Lyon. He turned the city's infrastructure against its people, using informants, collaborators, and the ever-present threat of reprisals to maintain control. The Montluc prison, originally built in the 19th century, became an antechamber of death, where thousands of prisoners passed through on their way to torture sessions, deportation, or execution. Today, the prison stands as a memorial, its cells bearing silent witness to the suffering endured within its walls. One of Barbie's most chilling innovations was the use of Frontstalt houses, apartments throughout the city that served as impromptu torture centers. These nondescript locations allowed the Gestapo to operate with terrifying efficiency, snatching people off the streets and extracting information before anyone knew they were missing. One such house at 200 Rue de Créqui became infamous for the screams that emanated from its windows at night. The true extent of Barbie's crimes may never be fully known. Many of his victims did not survive to tell their stories, and countless others were too traumatized to speak of their experiences. However, the testimonies that did emerge paint a picture of a man consumed by sadistic rage and ideological fervor. Marcel Ophels, in his documentary Hotel Terminus: The Life and Times of Klaus Barbie, captured the enduring trauma of Barbie's victims, with one survivor stating, "He didn't just kill people, he killed their souls." As the Allied forces closed in on Lyon in late August 1944, Barbie fled the city, leaving behind a legacy of pain and horror. He escaped on August 19th, just days before Lyon was liberated on September 3rd. The Hotel Terminus, once a symbol of Nazi terror, was reclaimed by the people of Lyon. But the scars left by the butcher would take generations to heal. Resistance fighter Yves Farge summed up the city's liberation, saying, "Lyon has suffered, Lyon has fought, Lyon is liberated." In the years that followed, survivors and family members of Barbie's victims fought tirelessly to bring him to justice. It would take nearly 4 decades before he finally faced trial in Lyon, the very city he had terrorized. As he stood in the dock in 1987, facing his accusers, the weight of his crimes hung heavy in the courtroom. Simone Lagrange, who had survived the last train and Auschwitz, confronted him, saying, "I want you to admit to your crimes before you die." Barbie, unrepentant to the end, declared, "When I stand before the throne of God, I shall be judged innocent." The Serpent's Escape, Klaus Barbie's shadow life in Bolivia. As the dust settled on the ruins of Nazi Germany in May 1945, one of its most notorious war criminals slipped through the cracks of justice, embarking on a journey that would lead him from the blood-soaked streets of Lyon to the sun-baked highlands of Bolivia. Klaus Barbie, the infamous Butcher of Lyon, had cheated the hangman's noose and was about to begin a new chapter in his dark saga. The man who had once declared, "I don't recognize any Jewish state, I'm a German and will remain one," was about to reinvent himself in a land far from the scenes of his crimes. The year was 1945, and Europe was a chaotic patchwork of devastation and retribution. Barbie, his hands still metaphorically stained with the blood of thousands, found an unlikely savior in the form of the United States Counterintelligence Corps, CIC. The CIC, eager to exploit Barbie's anti-communist expertise in the burgeoning Cold War, provided him with a new identity and a ticket to freedom. This decision would later prompt US Senator Alan Cranston to remark, "To have used Barbie and others like him, whose sole qualifications were their committed Nazi past, was a blunder of the first order." Under the alias Klaus Altmann, Barbie was spirited away to South America in 1951, joining the ranks of numerous Nazi fugitives seeking refuge in the welcoming arms of right-wing Latin American regimes. Barbie's journey took him first to Argentina, where he briefly worked for the government of Juan Perón, before finally settling in Bolivia in 1955. La Paz, the world's highest capital city, perched precariously in the Andes, at over 3,500 meters above sea level, became Barbie's new hunting ground. Here, amidst the thin air and rugged terrain, the former Gestapo officer found a political climate as harsh and unforgiving as the landscape itself. The city's narrow, winding streets and colonial architecture provided the perfect backdrop for a man accustomed to operating in the shadows. Bolivia, in the 1950s, was a nation in turmoil, plagued by coups and counter-coups. It was in this volatile environment that Barbie, now known as Klaus Altmann, thrived. He quickly ingratiated himself with the country's military rulers, offering his expertise in interrogation and counterinsurgency. His services were particularly valued by the regime of General René Barrientos, who came to power in a 1964 coup. Barbie's influence grew to such an extent that he was often seen in the company of high-ranking officials at public events, a far cry from his days as a fugitive. Barbie's official role was that of a businessman running a shipping company called Transmaritima Boliviana. However, this was merely a front for his more sinister activities. Behind the scenes, Barbie was deeply involved in arms trafficking, drug smuggling, and providing security consultancy to a succession of Bolivian dictators. His methods, honed in the torture chambers of Lyon, found new application in the suppression of leftist movements across Bolivia. One former Bolivian intelligence officer, speaking on condition of anonymity, later revealed, "Barbie's techniques were considered state-of-the-art. He taught us things we had never even imagined." One of Barbie's most notorious acts during this period was his alleged involvement in the capture and execution of Che Guevara in 1967. While his exact role remains disputed, there are claims that Barbie provided intelligence that led to Guevara's location and advised on interrogation techniques. The revolutionary's final words, "Shoot, coward, you are only going to kill a man," may well have been uttered in the presence of his old nemesis, the Nazi torturer. Felix Rodriguez, the CIA operative present at Guevara's execution, later wrote in his memoirs, "There were whispers of a European advisor, someone with a dark past. We never saw him, but his presence was felt." Barbie's influence extended beyond Bolivia's borders. He became a key figure in the so-called cocaine coup of July 17, 1980, when General Luis Garcia Metzer seized power with the backing of drug traffickers and international neo-fascists. Barbie, drawing on his old Nazi connections, helped recruit European mercenaries for the coup, including the Italian terrorist Stefano del Chiaia. The coup established Bolivia as a narco-state, with Barbie at the heart of its operations. As one DEA agent later put it, Barbie turned Bolivia into a playground for ex-Nazis and drug lords. It was like a bad Hollywood movie, except it was real. Throughout his time in Bolivia, Barbie maintained contact with other Nazi fugitives scattered across South America. He was part of a loose network that included Josef Mengele in Paraguay and Walter Rauff in Chile. This rat line, as it came to be known, was a testament to the enduring bonds forged in the crucible of the Third Reich. In 1972, a secret meeting of these ex-Nazis was held in Sao Paulo, Brazil, where Barbie reportedly boasted, "We are building a Fourth Reich here in South America." Barbie's life in Bolivia was not without its luxuries. He owned a sprawling hacienda outside La Paz, where he entertained government officials and fellow ex-Nazis. His daughter, Ute, married a Bolivian and became part of the country's elite. For a time, it seemed that Klaus Barbie had truly escaped his past. He even had the audacity to give interviews to local newspapers, presenting himself as a respectable businessman and anti-communist crusader. In one such interview with La Razón in 1976, he declared, "Bolivia has given me a new life, and I am grateful for it." The lions roar. Justice catches up with the butcher. In the annals of post-World War II justice, few stories are as compelling as the relentless pursuit and eventual capture of Klaus Barbie, the infamous Butcher of Lyon. For decades, this Nazi war criminal had eluded the grasp of justice, hiding in plain sight in the Bolivian highlands. But on February 5, 1983, as the Andean sun cast long shadows over La Paz, the net finally closed around one of the most wanted men in the world. The capture of Barbie was not just the end of a manhunt, but the beginning of a reckoning that would force France to confront its wartime past. The hunt for Barbie had been a long and arduous journey, spanning continents and decades. At the forefront of this pursuit were Serge and Berthe Klaasfeld, a husband and wife team of Nazi hunters whose determination would become legendary. Their quest began in earnest in 1971 when they discovered that Barbie was living comfortably in Bolivia under the alias Klaus Altmann. The Klaasfelds' investigation was meticulous, involving countless hours poring over documents and tracking down leads. They even enlisted the help of their young son, Arno, who at one point posed as a journalist to confirm Barbie's identity. The Klaasfelds' methods were as unorthodox as they were effective. In 1972, Berthe Klaasfeld chained herself to a bench in La Paz, demanding Barbie's extradition. Her actions garnered international attention, shining a spotlight on Bolivia's harboring of Nazi fugitives. Serge Klaasfeld later recalled, "We knew we had to make noise, to make it impossible for the world to ignore Barbie's presence." Their persistence was remarkable, especially considering the threats they faced. In 1979, neo-Nazis bombed their car in France, a stark reminder of the dangerous waters they were navigating. Their efforts bore fruit in 1983 when a newly elected civilian government in Bolivia, led by President Hernán Siles Zuazo, finally agreed to extradite Barbie. The decision came after years of diplomatic pressure and changing political winds. On that fateful February day, Bolivian police, accompanied by French officials, arrested the 69-year-old Barbie at his home in La Paz. The operation, codenamed Condor, was the culmination of years of planning and negotiation. Interestingly, the French team included Roger Shea, a former resistance fighter who had been tortured by Barbie during the war. Shea later described the moment of arrest. "I looked into his eyes, and for a second, I saw a flicker of recognition. He knew his time was up." As he was led away, Barbie reportedly quipped, "I have nothing to hide. I'm proud of my past." These words would come to haunt him as he was flown to France, touching down at the Lyon airport on February 6, 1983. It was a poetic return to the very city where, 4 decades earlier, he had earned his gruesome moniker. The flight itself was fraught with tension. French authorities, fearing an assassination attempt, had Barbie wear a bulletproof vest and surrounded him with heavily armed guards. The sight of Barbie on French soil electrified the nation. Survivors of his brutality, many now in their twilight years, felt a mix of relief and trepidation. As one survivor, Lisa Lesèvre, put it, "I never thought I would live to see this day. Now, the nightmares might finally end." Lesèvre had been tortured by Barbie for 9 days in 1944, an ordeal that left her with lifelong injuries. Her testimony would later prove crucial in the trial. The trial of Klaus Barbie began on May 11, 1987, in Lyon's Palais de Justice. The ornate 19th century courthouse stood in stark contrast to the grim tales that would unfold within its walls. Over the next 8 weeks, the court would hear testimony from 97 witnesses, painting a harrowing picture of life under Barbie's reign of terror. The proceedings were broadcast on French television, marking the first time cameras were allowed in a French courtroom. This decision was not without controversy, with some arguing it would turn the trial into a spectacle. The prosecution, led by Pierre Truche, presented a damning case. They detailed Barbie's role in the deportation of 44 Jewish children from an orphanage in Isieux, a crime that would become emblematic of his cruelty. Leah Feldblum, one of the few survivors of this deportation, testified, "I can still hear the screams of the children as they were torn from their beds. Barbie stood there smiling, as if he were watching a school play." The Isieux raid, which took place on April 6, 1944, became a focal point of the trial, symbolizing the depths of Nazi barbarity. Other witnesses recounted horrific tales of torture at the Hotel Terminus, Barbie's headquarters in Lyon. Simone Lagrange, who was tortured by Barbie, confronted her tormentor in court. "Do you remember Klaus Barbie?" she asked, her voice unwavering. "I want you to look at me. I was the girl you tortured." Lagrange's testimony was particularly powerful, as she described how Barbie had tortured her father to death and deported her mother to Auschwitz. Barbie's defense, led by controversial lawyer Jacques Vergès, attempted to shift focus onto France's colonial atrocities, arguing that the trial was an exercise in selective justice. Vergès, known for his rupture defense strategy, declared, "France has no right to judge this man when its own hands are stained with the blood of Algeria." This tactic, while provocative, ultimately failed to sway the jury. Vergès, who had previously defended other controversial figures like Carlos the Jackal, later said of Barbie, "He was a soldier doing a dirty job in a dirty war, but he was not alone." Throughout the trial, Barbie remained largely impassive, attending only the first 3 days before boycotting the proceedings. His absence did little to diminish the weight of evidence against him. Documents, eyewitness accounts, and historical records painted a damning picture of his activities during the war. One particularly chilling piece of evidence was a telegram Barbie had sent to his superiors in 1944, boasting of the deportation of Jewish children. This morning, the Jewish children's home in Isieux was cleaned out. Altogether, 41 children aged 3 to 13 were apprehended. Transportation to Drancy will take place on July 4th, 44. One of the most shocking revelations came from testimony about Barbie's role in the arrest of Jean Moulin, a hero of the French resistance. Witnesses described how Barbie personally tortured Moulin, who died without revealing any information. The courtroom fell silent as Daniel Cordier, Moulin's former secretary, recounted, "Moulin's silence in the face of such brutality was the epitome of resistance." Moulin's sister Laure also testified, saying, "My brother's sacrifice must not be in vain. This trial is for him and for all those who resisted." As the trial progressed, it became clear that this was more than just the prosecution of one man. It was a reckoning with France's wartime past, forcing the nation to confront uncomfortable truths about collaboration and resistance. Historian Henry Rousseau noted, "The Barbie trial opened old wounds, but it also allowed for a kind of national catharsis." The trial brought to light the complex nature of French society during the occupation, challenging simplistic narratives of heroic resistance and universal collaboration. On July 4, 1987, after deliberating for more than 6 hours, the jury returned its verdict. Klaus Barbie was found guilty of crimes against humanity and sentenced to life imprisonment. As the verdict was read, a collective sigh seemed to ripple through the courtroom and beyond. Outside the Palais de Justice, crowds had gathered, and a cheer went up when the news was announced. It was a moment of vindication for the survivors and their families, many of whom had waited over 4 decades for this day. Barbie's final words to the court were unrepentant. "I fought against the resistance, which I respect, in accordance with my ideals. I have the feeling that the French are overcome by a guilt complex because of the Vichy government and because of the events of the Algerian War." His lack of remorse was striking, even to those who had followed the case closely. It echoed Hannah Arendt's famous observation about the banality of evil, highlighting how ordinary individuals could commit extraordinary atrocities while maintaining a sense of normalcy. The conviction of Klaus Barbie was a landmark moment in international justice. It marked the first time France had prosecuted someone for crimes against humanity and set important legal precedents. The trial had lasted 37 days, involved over 800 civil plaintiffs, and cost an estimated 3.5 million francs. It was, at the time, the most expensive trial in French history. The proceedings had been followed closely around the world, with daily updates in major newspapers and on television. The media played a crucial role in shaping the trial's impact on public consciousness. Documentaries like Marcel Auful's Hotel Terminus, The Life and Times of Klaus Barbie, 1988, brought the complexities of Barbie's case to a wider audience. The film, which won an Academy Award, delved deep into Barbie's post-war activities, including his work for US intelligence and his life in Bolivia, adding layers to the public's understanding of the long shadow cast by Nazi war criminals. Auful's work was particularly notable for its interviews with Bolivians who had known Barbie under his alias Klaus Altmann, revealing how a war criminal could lead a seemingly normal life for decades. In literature, the Barbie trial inspired numerous works, both fiction and non-fiction. Notably, the 1989 book The Butcher of Lyon by Brendan Murphy provided a comprehensive account of Barbie's crimes and his eventual capture, becoming a seminal text for those seeking to understand the case's historical context. Murphy's work detailed Barbie's reign of terror in Lyon, including his role in the deportation of 44 Jewish children from Lisieux on April 6, 1944, an event that became central to his prosecution. The trial's legacy continues to resonate in contemporary discussions about war crimes and accountability. The successful prosecution of Barbie, along with other Nazi war criminals like Adolf Eichmann, has served as a touchstone for debates about international justice. When the International Criminal Court was established in 2002, many pointed to the Barbie trial as a precursor, demonstrating the possibility and importance of holding individuals accountable for crimes against humanity, regardless of the time elapsed. As Benjamin Ferencz, the last surviving Nuremberg prosecutor, once said, "There are no time limits on crimes against humanity." In recent years, the Barbie case has found new relevance in discussions about modern-day atrocities and the pursuit of justice. The conviction of Bosnian Serb leader Radovan Karadzic in 2016 for genocide and war crimes drew comparisons to Barbie's trial, with many citing it as evidence of the enduring influence of post-World War II prosecutions on international law. Similarly, the ongoing trials of former Khmer Rouge officials in Cambodia have been linked to the precedent set by the Barbie case, highlighting the global reach of its impact. The story of Klaus Barbie has also been adapted for the screen multiple times, each iteration contributing to the evolving public understanding of his crimes and their historical context. The 2007 French film My Enemy's Enemy, directed by Kevin MacDonald, explored the complex web of Cold War politics that allowed Barbie to evade justice for so long, prompting audiences to consider the often murky intersection of geopolitics and justice. The film revealed how Barbie, under the codename Adler, worked for the US Counterintelligence Corps from 1947 to 1951, a fact that many found shocking and disillusioning. In the aftermath, reactions were mixed. For many survivors and their families, the verdict brought a measure of closure. Serge Klarsfeld stated, "Justice has been done, but it can never truly compensate for the suffering Barbie caused." Others felt that the trial, while important, had come too late. Raymond Obrach, a prominent resistance figure, remarked, "We have waited too long for this moment. Many who should have seen this day did not live to witness it." Klaus Barbie spent the remainder of his life in Montluc prison, the very place where he had once imprisoned and tortured his victims. This ironic twist of fate was not lost on those who had suffered under his rule. Barbie died of leukemia on September 25, 1991, at the age of 77. To the end, he remained unrepentant, a chilling reminder of the depths of human cruelty and the enduring challenge of bringing war criminals to justice. As we close this chapter of history, the echoes of Klaus Barbie's trial in 1987 continue to reverberate through time. From the halls of the Palais de Justice in Lyon to the far corners of our collective memory, the story of the Butcher of Lyon serves as a stark reminder of the long arm of justice and the enduring power of bearing witness. In the end, perhaps the most poignant lesson from this dark chapter of history comes from Anne Frank, whose words resonate across the decades. "I keep my ideals, because in spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart." It is with this hope, tempered by the knowledge of history's darkest moments, that we move forward, ever mindful of the past and committed to a more just future. Thank you for joining us on this journey through memory and justice. May the lessons of the Barbie trial continue to inspire and educate generations to come. Au revoir et n'oublions jamais. Goodbye, and let us never forget.